Markets are making investors and regulators quite nervous. Fear is written in many faces of investors. They're mostly afraid of breaking down equity markets. Now we at BIL, we are much more afraid about bond markets. Why? Because we are afraid of an uncontrollable increase in yield. And the impact of this, not only on investors, but on banks and insurances, will be tremendous, and it will hit the heart of our economies, probably within the next 36 months. There's a stock out there of roughly 7 trillion, in other words, of 7,000 billion worth of US dollars of negative yielding debt. And this is set to grow day by day. So if we look at companies and at governments, basically they are being paid to borrow money, whereas investors and institutions, by holding negative yielding debt, they lose money while they lend. Now this defies any logic. Bond yields are negative, especially because central banks have been trying to stimulate world economies in a very concerted fashion. They have been introducing negative rates in Europe and in Japan, and they have been buying bonds very strongly. Now, when you buy bonds, as a result, the price of those instruments will go up, and you will see the impact, rock bottom yields, which is nothing else than a reflection of these very high prices. Now, any investors know when they buy those negative yielding bonds, if they hold them to expiry, they will destroy value. So the question is, why do they continue to buy those negative yielding bonds? Part of the answer is that investors and institutions, they are bound by mandates set to allocate funds to bond funds, independent if they make or lose money. Some investors consider as well that liquidity is more important than returns. Now, some investors might be savvy and they might expect negative inflation. Let me explain. If we have a negative inflation of -2% and we buy a negative yielding debt instrument of -0.5%, your return still is -0.5%. However, your inflation-adjusted return will be plus 1.5%. Indeed, those investors are very savvy. The risks associated with buying bonds is that a small yield increase can have tremendous impacts. Let's go back 12 months. Last year in April, what we saw is that the 10-year Bund moved from 5 basis points to 90 basis points. In other words, investors lost over 6 weeks 8% of their investment. This probably corresponds roughly to over 100 years of income of this Bund. And as you can appreciate, this might give a terrible hit to financial institutions. Bonds become more and more volatile, especially as they are characterized by giving a periodic income at regular intervals. Now, when the income is not anymore given because of the pricing, what is happening is that investors buy bonds in order to sell them at a higher price. So they treat bonds the same way as we treat basically equities, and equities have a very high volatility. Investors can solely protect themselves by diversifying themselves within the same asset class, i.e. buying credits, sovereigns, inflation-protected bonds. On the other side, also by investing into equities and real estate. This is key. And our advice to any investors is please diversify.